Media fact-checker. Stephen Colbert to co-write a new Lord of the Rings film after leaving The Late Show. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Stephen Colbert will co-write a new Lord of the Rings film titled Shadow of the Past. The film will be developed alongside Philippa Boyens and Peter Miggy, Colbert's son. Peter Jackson is involved in producing the film and made the announcement via social media. The film is the second of two upcoming Lord of the Rings projects from Warner Bros. Discovery and New Line Cinema. The first film, The Lord of the Rings, The Hunt for Gollum, is set for release on December 17, 2027. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states the original trilogy grossed $2.9 billion without inflation adjustment, while The Guardian states the combined gross of all 6 films is $5.9 billion. ABC mentions the cancellation of The Late Show was announced in July 2023, but The Guardian does not specify the exact month of the announcement. ABC does not mention the political context of the cancellation, while The Guardian highlights CBS's $16 million Trump settlement as a factor. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Coroner's inquest into wellness influencers' freebirth death and doula's refusal to testify. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Stacey Warner-Key, 30, died after complications from a free birth at her Seaford home on September 29, 2023. She suffered a postpartum hemorrhage and multiple cardiac arrests before dying at Frankston Hospital. Doula Emily Lowell, known as the authentic birthkeeper, was present during the birth and when 000 was called. Lowell has refused to provide a statement citing privilege against self-incrimination, though she may testify under court order. Victoria's Health Complaints Commissioner issued an interim ban on Lowell from providing general health services in Victoria until April 7, 2024. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources on core factual claims. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Childcare worker convicted of child abuse in Queensland, Australia, 2026 trial. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Avinder J. Singh, 43, a Fiji citizen, was convicted of 1 count of indecent treatment of a child under his care in Queensland in 2026. Singh was found not guilty of digital rape charges against a young girl at a Sunshine Coast childcare centre in 2022. Singh was sentenced to 20 months in jail, with half, 10 months, suspended before deportation to Fiji. Singh voluntarily returned to Queensland in February 2026 to face trial after being deported in July 2025. Singh's visa was cancelled in 2022 after being charged with rape, but he remained in Australia until May 2025 when detained in immigration detention. But not all outlets told the same story. News Kamau reports the victim's father said he would get lower if I didn't pay my taxes as a reaction to the verdict, while ABC does not include this quote. News Kamau states the family's fight for justice lasted 4 years now, but ABC does not specify the duration of the legal process. News Kamau mentions Singh was deported in 2025 before his court date, while ABC clarifies he was deported in July 2025 and detained in immigration detention for a month before returning voluntarily in February 2026. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Boating accident off Tasmania's northwest coast leaves 1 dead, 3 rescued after capsizing. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. 4 people, 3 adults, ages 27, 33, and 35, and a 6-year-old child were on a fishing trip departing Montague Boat Ramp west of Smithton at approximately 5:30 p.m. on Saturday, June 15, 2024. The vessel capsized around 9 p.m. on Saturday, throwing all 4 occupants into the water off Tasmania's northwest coast near Robbins Passage Island. 3 survivors, 27-year-old woman, 33-year-old man, and 6-year-old child, were located near Big Stony Island around 1 p.m. on Sunday, June 16, and taken to Northwest Regional Hospital for observation. The missing 35-year-old man's body was found on the eastern side of Robbins Island on Monday, June 17, 2024. All 3 rescued survivors were wearing life jackets when found, with no serious injuries reported. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC, Article 1, states the 3 rescued were located in the water at Robbins Passage, while ABC, Article 2, and Newscomau specify they were found near Big Stony Island, north of Robbins Island. ABC, Article 2, says the 35-year-old man was understood to have not been wearing a life jacket, while Newscomau does not specify his life jacket status beyond the general claim that the other 3 were wearing theirs. ABC, Article 1, mentions the search was ongoing as of Sunday afternoon, while ABC, Article 2, and Newscomau report the body was found on Monday morning. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Urban trees' impact on property value and public perception in Sydney. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Associate Professor Song Shi led a study, 2021 to 2025, at UTS finding trees 10 to 20m from a house increased property value by $30,000, while trees within 10m reduced value by up to $70,000, adjusted for bedrooms, land size, parking, CBD proximity. Matt Cantwell, Secret Gardens, cited Ocean Street, Woollahra, and Paddington Street, Paddington, as examples of streets with aesthetic value from trees. Danielle Hughes, Greater Sydney Landcare, noted mature trees can cool surrounding areas by nearly 10 degrees Celsius and reduce cooling costs by 20 to 30%. Dr. Nada Nadapaju, University of Sydney, and Amir Pakiz found Western Sydney suburbs like St Mary's and Blacktown increased tree coverage, while Liverpool saw a decrease. Adam Haddow, Australian Institute of Architects, stated Australian natives are criticised for dropping branches flowers, affecting lawns and pools. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the 2 sources. This story was covered by Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Arrest of Deklin Donnelly in Sydney grandfather's mistaken identity kidnapping and murder case. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Deklin James Donnelly, 23, was arrested on March 6 at a Seven Hills home and charged with murder and kidnapping of Chris Bagsarian, an 85-year-old grandfather abducted from North Ryde on February 13. Bagsarian's body was found near a golf course in Pitt Town on February 24, 11 days after his abduction. Donnelly was found wearing only his underwear during his arrest, with an sawn-off shotgun allegedly hidden under his bed at the Seven Hills property. Police allege Donnelly was a ringleader in the kidnapping plot, recruiting others including Daniel Stevens, 24, and Gerard Andrews, 29, who were charged separately on March 5. Janice Thurston, 23, Donnelly's girlfriend, was arrested alongside him and sentenced to 10 months imprisonment, 6-month non-parole, for an apprehended violence order breach and prior police assault charges. But not all outlets told the same story. Newscomau states Donnelly allegedly murdered Bagsarian between February 13 morning and 9 p.m. on February 14, while SMH implies the killing occurred shortly after the captors realized they had the wrong man, no specific timeframe given. SMH reports Donnelly was contracted to kidnap Dimitri Stepanyan's father, a relative of the Alamdine crime family, but Newscomau does not mention this specific motive or crime family connection. SMH describes Donnelly as one of the higher players in that crew and states he was involved in organizing the kidnapping of another person, while ABC's headline and summary do not emphasize his leadership role as prominently. This story was covered by ABC News, news.com.au, and Sydney Morning Herald. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Queensland police shoot man during knife-related incident in Logan Central. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A man in his 30s was shot by police in Logan Central, Queensland, on Saturday evening around 6 p.m. The incident occurred at Carmody Centre on Ewing Road, near Carmody Street, Logan Central. Police were called due to reports of a man armed with a knife making threats. The man was shot in the abdomen after allegedly approaching police with a weapon. The victim was treated with first aid by police and taken to Princess Alexandra Hospital, where he remains in a stable condition. But not all outlets told the same story. News Kamau states the man is 27 years old, while ABC describes him as in his 30s. News Kamau mentions the incident occurred overnight without a specific time, while ABC specifies till 6 p.m. News Kamau says police allege the man approached them with the weapon, while ABC does not specify this exact phrasing. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. ABC workers' 24-hour strike over rejected pay offer and conditions dispute. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. ABC workers went on a 24-hour strike starting at 11 a.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time on Wednesday, the first in 2 decades. 60% of ABC staff who participated in the vote rejected the latest pay offer under the 3-year Enterprise Bargaining Agreement, EBA. The rejected pay offer included a 3.5% pay rise in the first year and 3.25% in the subsequent 2 years, plus a $1,000 one-off bonus for ongoing and fixed-term staff. ABC Managing Director Hugh Marks apologized to audiences for the strike and defended the offer as financially responsible and competitive with industry standards. The Media, Entertainment and Arts Alliance, MEAA, and the Community and Public Sector Union, CPSU, represent striking ABC staff. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 and Article 2 both state the rejected pay offer included a 3.5% pay rise in the first year and 3.25% in the subsequent 2 years, but Article 4 states the offer was a 10% total pay rise over 3 years, 3.5% in the first year and 3.25% in the second and third years. Article 1 and Article 2 mention the $1,000 bonus was for all ongoing and fixed-term staff covered by the EBA, while Article 5 states the $1,000 payment excluded casual staff. Article 1 and Article 4 state that 60% of staff who participated voted no, but Article 3 states that only 40% of staff who voted were in favor of the offer, implying a 60% rejection rate. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Testing and reviewing the best chef's knives for home cooks. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Ben Lippitt tested 14 knives over a fortnight for The Guardian's knife review. The Wusthof Classic Chef Knife, 20 cm, was named the best overall chef's knife by both articles. Victorinox Fibrox Chef's Knife, 20 cm, was identified as the best budget knife, priced at £43. Helen Simmons, a knife specialist, advised against using knives on stones, bones, or frozen food. Knife specialist Helen Simmons recommended cleaning knives lightly under a tap and drying them immediately. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 does not mention the Sabatier Cook's Knife, 25 cm, as a best workhorse Western-style knife, while Article 2 does. Article 1 does not mention the Robert Welsh Signature Cook's Knife, 14 cm, as the best small chef's knife, while Article 2 does. Article 1 does not mention the All Day Goods Malden Santoku Knife, 16 cm, as the best Japanese-style knife, while Article 2 does. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian Muslims celebrate Eid and Nowruz amid Middle East war and rising Islamophobia. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Eid al-Fitr and Nowruz celebrations are taking place in Australia this weekend, 2024 dates implied. Heidelberg Mosque in Melbourne expected 1,500 worshippers for Eid prayers on Friday morning. Logan Mosque in Sydney anticipates 50,000 attendees for Eid prayers, requiring heightened security. Security at mosques has been increased due to concerns about Islamophobic incidents and potential threats. The 7th anniversary of the Christchurch massacre, 2019, is being remembered during Eid. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources for verifiable facts. This story was covered by The Guardian and SBS News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. U.S. Senate confirms Oklahoma Senator Markwayne Mullin as DHS Secretary amid immigration enforcement debates. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Markwayne Mullin was confirmed as U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security by the Senate on Monday with a 54-45 vote, largely along party lines. Rand Paul, Republican Kentucky, was the only Republican to vote against Mullin's confirmation, while John Fetterman, Democrat Pennsylvania, and Martin Heinrich, Democrat New Mexico, were the only Democrats to support him. Mullin's confirmation came after a Senate committee advanced his nomination on Thursday with 7 Republicans voting yes and Rand Paul voting no. Mullin previously served as a U.S. representative and was elected Oklahoma's junior senator in 2022. ICE and other immigration enforcement agencies remained operational during the February shutdown due to $40 billion in Republican-authorized funding from the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, 2023. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states Mullin's confirmation vote occurred on Monday, while Article 2 states the committee advanced his nomination on Thursday, with a full Senate vote expected in the coming days. Article 1 reports Mullin's confirmation vote happened the same day as the committee vote, but Article 2 separates the two events by a day. Article 1 mentions Mullin's predecessor, Kristi Noem, was fired by Trump for dissatisfaction with her personal appearances, while Article 2 does not mention this reason. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Victorian teachers' 2024 strike over pay and conditions dispute. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Tens of thousands, 30,000 plus, Victorian public school teachers, principals, and education support staff are striking on Tuesday, the first walkout since 2013. The Australian Education Union, AEU, secured Fair Work Commission approval for the strike after 98% of members voted in favour. The AEU is demanding a 35% pay increase over 4 years, citing lower pay and excessive workloads compared to other states. The Victorian government offered an 18% pay deal, 8% immediate plus 3% annual increments, which the AEU rejected as totally unacceptable. Over 500 schools in Victoria will operate with skeleton staff or limited supervision due to the strike. But not all outlets told the same story. News Kamau and Thij both report the government's 18% offer was rejected, but Thij specifies it came a week ago while News Kamau does not detail timing. ABC states the government's offer was 17%, with 8% immediate, while Guardian and Thij report it as 18%, with 8% immediate plus 3% annual. Guardian and ABC report schools will remain open but with limited supervision, while News Kamau notes some schools encouraged parents to keep children home despite no official closures. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Trump orders ICE agents to US airports amid DHS funding shutdown and TSA staff shortages. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Donald Trump threatened to deploy ICE agents to US airports starting Monday if Democrats do not agree to DHS funding measures. Guardian 1, Guardian 2, Guardian 4, ABC 3, ABC 5. The partial government shutdown began on February 14, 2026, and TSA workers have missed their second full paycheck by March 27, Guardian 1, Guardian 4, ABC 3, ABC 5. At least 366 TSA agents have quit since the shutdown began. Guardian 1, Guardian 2, Guardian 4, ABC 5. Democrats blocked a DHS funding bill 5 times since the shutdown began. Guardian 1, ABC 3. ICE agents are not specifically trained for airport security, which is TSA's domain. Guardian 2, ABC 3, ABC 5. But not all outlets told the same story. Guardian 1 states Trump's post included a focus on arresting immigrants from Somalia, but ABC 3 and Guardian 2 do not mention this specific claim. Guardian 2 and ABC 3 mention Homan's CNN comments about ICE agents covering exits, but Guardian 1 does not detail this specific role. Guardian 1 mentions Trump's claim that ICE would immediately arrest all illegal immigrants, but ABC 3 and Guardian 2 do not repeat this exact phrasing. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Federal approval of 600+ new gas wells in Queensland's Surrott-Bowen basins until 2081. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The federal government approved up to 1,695 new gas wells in Queensland's Surrott and Bowen basins under the Australia Pacific LNG, APLNG, project. The project includes 1,545 kilometres of pipelines and 3 processing facilities across the Surrott and Bowen basins. APLNG is a joint venture between US firm ConocoPhillips, Australian company Origin Energy, and Chinese operator Sinopec. The approval covers an area roughly bounded by Rolleston, north, Wandoan, east, Tara, south, and in June, west. The project is subject to 120 to 126 environmental conditions, including protections for threatened species, water resources, and chemical risk assessments. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states the approval is valid until 2081, while The Guardian implies the operational timeline is until 2061 with an extended approval for environmental conditions. ABC reports 1,695 new wells and 1,545 kilometers of pipelines, but The Guardian does not specify the exact number of wells, only confirming up to 1,695. ABC quotes Madeleine King emphasizing job creation and domestic gas supply, while The Guardian's Lock the Gate criticizes the project as profit-driven for multinational exporters. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian government urges Fair Work Commission for minimum wage increase above inflation. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Albanese government submitted to the Fair Work Commission's annual wage review asking for an economically sustainable real wage increase for 2.7 million minimum wage and award-reliant workers in Australia. About 2.7 million Australians, roughly a quarter of the nation's workforce, are on the national minimum wage or award-reliant jobs. The current minimum wage is $948 per full-time week, which is $175.40 per week higher than when the Albanese government took office in 2022. The Fair Work Commission will decide on any wage increase in coming months, with the new rate set to take effect from July 1st. The Consumer Price Index rose 3.7% in February 2026, down 0.1% from the previous month, according to official statistics. But not all outlets told the same story. News Kamau states the minimum wage is currently $175.40 per week higher than in 2022, while ABC does not provide this specific figure but focuses on the current rate of $948 per week. News Kamau mentions the government's submission suggests an increase consistent with inflation returning to the RBA's 2 to 3% target band in 2026 to 27, but ABC does not explicitly mention this timeline for inflation targets. News Kamau does not mention the government's submission being ambiguous about what constitutes a real increase, which ABC explicitly highlights as a point of ambiguity. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. The Mind Diet's link to brain health and dementia prevention through diet and genetics. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Mind Diet, Mediterranean-intervention for neurodegenerative delay, emphasizes green vegetables, beans, whole grains, nuts, berries, poultry, fish, and olive oil while limiting red meat, butter, cheese, fried foods, and sweets. A 2024 Lancet Commission report identified 14 modifiable risk factors that could prevent or delay 45% of dementia cases, including high LDL cholesterol, 7% influence, and untreated vision loss, 2%. The Mind Diet is associated with a 15 to 22% reduction in dementia risk among people following Mediterranean-style diets, with the Mind Diet showing the strongest effect among 3 patterns studied, ABC and THEJ. The Framingham Heart Study found those adhering most closely to the Mind Diet had more grey matter and less brain volume loss over time, ABC. A 2019 study by Scientia professor Karin Arnsti, UNSW, found the Mind Diet reduced odds of mild cognitive impairment or dementia by 19%, THEJ SMH. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports that whole grains showed a weak association with brain health in the Framingham study, while THEJ SMH do not mention this specific finding. ABC states that a 3-month trial found no improvement in memory or thinking skills from the Mind Diet, whereas THEJ SMH do not reference this trial directly. ABC highlights that self-reported diet data is unreliable, particularly for people with early memory decline, but THEJ SMH do not emphasize this limitation. This story was covered by ABC News, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Donald Trump's Pearl Harbor joke during a White House meeting with Japan's PM Sonai Takeichi. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Donald Trump joked about Japan's 1941 Pearl Harbor attack during a White House press conference on December 7, 2023, saying we didn't tell anybody about it because we wanted surprise. Who knows better about surprise than Japan? The Japanese Prime Minister Sonai Takeichi visibly reacted with discomfort, shifting in her seat and widening her eyes during Trump's remarks. The Pearl Harbor attack killed 2,390 Americans and led to the US declaring war on Japan the next day, December 8, 1941. Trump's comments followed a question about why the US did not notify allies like Japan before striking Iran. Japan's constitution bans the use of force except for self-defense, limiting its military involvement in conflicts like Iran. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports Trump initially said Japan's help in the Strait of Hormuz was not needed, but later claimed Japan was stepping up to the plate, while SMH does not mention this shift in tone. The Guardian does not mention the $40 billion nuclear project or $33 billion gas investment announced by ABC and SMH. ABC states Trump praised Takeichi as very popular, powerful woman, but The Guardian and SMH do not include this specific phrasing. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and Sydney Morning Herald. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Women's Asian Cup 2026 final, Australia's Matildas lose 1-0 to Japan in Sydney. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Women's Asian Cup 2026 final was played on March 21, 2026, at Stadium Australia in Sydney, Australia, with kickoff at 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time. The match ended 1-0 in favour of Japan, with Micah Hameno scoring the only goal in the 15th minute. The crowd at Stadium Australia for the final was 74,397, the largest attendance for a Women's Asian Cup final. Japan's starting 11 included Ayaka Yamashita, GK, Saki Kumagai, Hinata Miyazawa, Riko Uki, and Micah Hameno, with Nils Nielsen as coach. Australia's starting 11 included Mackenzie Arnold, GK, Steph Catley, Winnie Heatley, Ellie Carpenter, Alana Kennedy, Sam Kerr, Caitlin Ford, and Mary Fowler, with Joe Montemurro as coach. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian, Article 1, states the crowd was a near sellout with only single tickets left available before kickoff, while ABC, Article 2, describes the crowd as not a sellout yet with 74,397 attendees. The Guardian, Article 4, describes the Matildas' first half performance as tense, fast, and high energy, while ABC, Article 6, calls it controlled chaos in the final 10 minutes. The Guardian, Article 1, mentions the Matildas' defensive unit was largely holding at bay Japan's pressure in the first half, whereas ABC, Article 6, states the Matildas were the better side in the final. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Qantas Jetstar reduces NZ flights due to rising jet fuel prices amid global fuel crisis. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Jetstar is cutting 12% of services on some flights between Auckland and Sydney, and Auckland and Brisbane, starting May. Jetstar reduced flights due to rising jet fuel prices caused by the Middle East conflict. Air New Zealand also reduced flights earlier this month, March 16 to May 3, citing 5% of total schedule cuts due to jet fuel volatility from the Middle East war. Vietnam Airlines plans to cancel 20-plus domestic flights weekly starting next month due to looming jet fuel shortages. Australia's fuel crisis includes 8% of service stations nationwide without one or more fuel grades, 560 stations affected as of reporting date. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports Jetstar reduced flights between Auckland and Christchurch Wellington, but Newscomau does not mention these internal NZ routes. Newscomau states over 55 flights have been cut from Auckland, Sydney and Sydney Air Queenstown routes, while ABC only mentions 12% of services on Auckland-Sydney-Brisbane routes. Newscomau cites 8% of Australian service stations without fuel, 560 stations, but ABC does not provide this specific percentage or total. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Death of married at first sight expert Mel Schilling from colon cancer. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Mel Schilling died on Tuesday, February 2026, at age 54 from colon cancer that metastasized to her brain. Schilling was first diagnosed with colon cancer in December 2023 and underwent surgery to remove a 5 cm tumor. In February 2024, a routine scan revealed small nodules in her lungs indicating metastasis. Schilling underwent 16 rounds of chemotherapy over 2 years before announcing her cancer had spread to her brain in December 2025. Her husband Gareth Brisbane confirmed her death on Instagram, describing her final words as a message for their daughter Maddie, 11, and herself. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian mentions Schilling died peacefully today while other sources do not specify the manner of her death. The ABC article states Schilling was eligible for a clinical trial starting March 2026, but no other source confirms this detail. The Guardian refers to Schilling as a Channel 4 expert, while all other sources focus solely on the Australian and UK versions of Married at First Sight star. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia-EU Free Trade Agreement, Farmers' Criticism versus Government Support. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Australia-EU Free Trade Agreement was finalised after 8 years of negotiations between Anthony Albanese and Ursula von der Leyen. The deal removes tariffs from 97.8% of Australian goods exported to the EU, including produce, dairy, machinery, and textiles. Australian beef exporters will gain 35,000 tonnes year to the EU, 700% increase, while sheep meat exporters will get 31,000 tonnes year, 5-fold increase. The agreement was announced on Tuesday, with the EU not planning to restart talks if the deal failed. The National Farmers Federation, NFF, is led by Hamish McIntyre, who criticized the deal as locking in low volumes for decades. But not all outlets told the same story. Newscomau reports the beef quota as 35,000 tons year, 700% increase, while ABC states 30,600 tons year, no percentage increase specified. Newscomau claims 95% of the Australian industry supports the deal, but ABC does not provide a similar statistic and focuses on farming groups' opposition. ABC states the EU offered subpar access and may use billion-dollar subsidies, while Newscomau does not mention subsidies or EU financial incentives. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia's waste sector faces diesel shortages threatening service disruptions and public health risks. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Waste collectors are receiving reduced diesel allocations, e.g., a NSW operator's 50,000 L fortnightly order was cut to 12,000 L, ABC, Newscomau. WA waste operators expect only about half their regular diesel allocations at next refill, ABC, Newscomau. The federal government temporarily lowered diesel standards, flashpoint threshold, to allow imports from the US, Canada, and Europe, ABC, Newscomau. Waste industry leaders, Brett Lemon of NSW, Alison Price of Queensland, Mike Bobrowicz of WA, are meeting Assistant Environment Minister Josh Wilson in Canberra, ABC, Newscomau. Hospitals, aged care, and supermarkets rely on continuous waste removal. Interruptions could cause public health problems within 48 hours, ABC, Newscomau. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between sources. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. ICE detains Canadian mother and autistic daughter in Texas immigration facility. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Tanya Warner, 47, originally from British Columbia, and her 7-year-old daughter Ayla are detained by ICE in Texas since March 14, 2025, after being stopped at a Border Patrol checkpoint in Sarita, Texas, while driving home from a baby shower in Raymondville, Texas. Both Warner and Ayla were taken for fingerprinting at the checkpoint and neither returned. Warner was initially held at the Rio Grande Valley Central Processing Center in McAllen, Texas, before being moved to the Dilley Processing Center in early 2025. Tanya Warner holds a Texas driver's license, work visa, and a functional visa valid until 2030, while Edward Warner, U.S. citizen, presented identification at the checkpoint. Warner and Ayla are being held in inhumane conditions, including handcuffing children, sleeping on 2-inch mats, and 24-hour lighting at the Rio Grande Valley facility. Dilley conditions are marginally better but still lack privacy and have round-the-clock surveillance. Global Affairs Canada acknowledges multiple cases of Canadians detained in U.S. immigration-related detention and advocates for their rights but cannot exempt them from local legal processes. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states Tanya Warner and her daughter were moved to Dilley Processing Center early on Friday, March 15, while Article 2 does not mention this transfer and focuses on Rio Grande Valley as their current location. Article 1 describes Ayla's rash as treated with Benadryl and mentions her befriending other detained children, while Article 2 does not mention Ayla's social interactions or specific treatment details beyond the rash. Article 1 claims Warner was initially held at Rio Grande Valley but moved to Dilley, while Article 2 implies they remain at Rio Grande Valley without confirming the transfer. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. US-Iran escalation over Strait of Hormuz and energy infrastructure threats in Middle East war. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Donald Trump gave Iran a 48-hour deadline, until 23:44 Greenwich Mean Time on March 25, to fully reopen the Strait of Hormuz without threat, or face US strikes on Iran's power plants, posting on Truth Social on March 24, 2026. Iran's parliament speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf stated that if Iran's power plants and infrastructure are targeted, vital infrastructure as well as energy and oil infrastructure across the entire region will be considered legitimate targets and will be irreversibly destroyed, according to statements on March 24 to 25, 2026. Iran's military operational command Qatam al-Anbiya warned that if the US targets Iran's power plants, the Strait of Hormuz will be completely closed and will not reopen until Iran's destroyed power plants are rebuilt, as reported on March 24 to 25, 2026. Iran's missiles struck southern Israeli cities Dimona and Orod on March 24 to 25, injuring approximately 200 people, including children, and damaging buildings, with Israeli air defenses failing to intercept some strikes, confirmed by multiple sources. The Strait of Hormuz remains effectively closed to vessels linked to Iran's enemies, US and Israel, as per Ali Mousavi, Iran's representative to the International Maritime Organization, on March 24 to 25, 2026. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian, Steve Reed, denied Iran was targeting Europe, stating he was not aware of any assessment that Iran intended to strike European capitals, while the Israeli military chief Eyal Zami claimed Iran's missiles had a range reaching Berlin, Paris, or Berlin, implying a direct threat to Europe. ABC reported that Lebanese President Joseph Aoun accused Israel of laying the groundwork for an invasion in Lebanon's south, while Israel's military stated it was targeting Hezbollah infrastructure to contain the threat in the south and eliminate it, framing the strikes as defensive rather than preparatory for an invasion. The Guardian, Steve Reed, stated Trump was speaking for himself when threatening to obliterate Iran's power plants, while other sources, e.g., Newscomau, SMH, presented the threat as an official US administration stance without qualifying it as Trump's personal opinion. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, and Sydney Morning Herald. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Italian PM Giorgia Meloni's referendum defeat on judiciary reform and its political fallout. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Giorgia Meloni's government proposed a referendum to reform Italy's judiciary, separating judges and prosecutors and altering the Superior Council of the Judiciary, CSM. The referendum was held over 2 days, Sunday through Monday, with 53.2 to 54% of voters rejecting the reform, while 46.8 to 46% supported it. Turnout reached a record 58.5 to 59% in the referendum, surpassing pre-poll forecasts. Giorgia Meloni's Brothers of Italy party leads in polls at approximately 30%, but her personal approval ratings are now weakened by the defeat. The referendum campaign featured inflammatory rhetoric from Meloni and her ministers targeting the judiciary, framing it as a battle over independence. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian, Article 1, reports turnout at 58.5%, while ABC states it was almost 59%. The Guardian, Article 3, states the referendum result was 53.2 to 46.8%, but Article 1 says 54 to 46%. ABC claims the reform sought to separate the roles of judges and prosecutors and change their oversight body, while The Guardian, Article 3, specifies it would divide the CSM into 2 councils and introduce a lottery system for appointments. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. First NFL regular season game in Australia at MCG on September 11th. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The first NFL regular season game in Australia will be played at the Melbourne Cricket Ground, MCG, on Friday, September 11th, 2025, with kickoff at 10:35 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. The match is between the San Francisco 49ers and the Los Angeles Rams. General admission tickets start at $95 for standing room and $140 for general seating, with pre-sales beginning April 1, 2025, at 9 a.m. and general sales on April 8 at 10 a.m. The NFL established an academy on the Gold Coast in 2024. The game coincides with the AFL's semi-final weekend, potentially impacting Victorian-hosted matches. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1, Newscamau, states the game is the first of up to 3 NFL games in Victoria over the next several years, while Article 2, Newscamau, does not specify the number of future games. Article 3, ABC, incorrectly labels the game as an NRL match in its headline, though the body clarifies it is an NFL game. Article 1 mentions the game was originally expected in October but moved to September, while Article 2 does not mention this change. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia faces fuel shortages amid diesel standard relaxation and supply disruptions. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Energy Minister Chris Bowen lowered Australia's diesel flashpoint standard from 61.5 degrees Celsius to 60.5 degrees Celsius for 6 months to increase supply options, ABC, Guardian 1, Guardian 2. Hundreds of service stations across Australia are experiencing fuel shortages, with at least 164 NSW stations without diesel and 289 without at least one fuel type, ABC, Guardian 1, Guardian 2. In Queensland, 55 stations lack diesel and 35 lack unleaded petrol, ABC, Guardian 1. 6 fuel shipments to Australia were cancelled in April, with some replaced by alternate sources, ABC. Chris Bowen released 20% of Australia's fuel reserve to address shortages, ABC. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports 289 NSW stations without at least one fuel type out of 400+, while Guardian 1 states only 37 NSW stations are without petrol, no mention of diesel shortages. ABC states Queensland had 55 stations without diesel and 35 without unleaded, but Guardian 1 only mentions 47 stations without diesel and 32 without unleaded, no overlap in numbers. ABC claims the government revealed 6 shipments were cancelled in April, while Guardian 1 says Bowen declined to say exactly when the government became aware of the cancellations. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian PM Albanese and Home Affairs Minister Burke heckled at Lokemba Mosque during Eid prayers. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Anthony Albanese and Tony Burke attended Lokemba Mosque in Sydney's West on Friday morning for Eid celebrations marking the end of Ramadan. Protesters at the mosque shouted phrases including genocide supporters, disgrace, shame, and get them out of here during the event. A 33-year-old man, later identified as Mukhlis Mr, was removed from the mosque by police after a disturbance and given a move-on direction. Lebanese Muslim Association Secretary Gamal Kir delivered a statement defending the invitation of Albanese and Burke, calling engagement with government not a betrayal of Gaza-Lebanon concerns. Israel's strikes in Lebanon have killed at least 912 people, including 111 children, and wounded 2,221 others, per Lebanese Health Ministry. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports Albanese was led out by police after being booed, while ABC and SMH describe him being escorted out or rushed into the mosque's office by organisers. SMH claims a 29-year-old protester named Ibrahim Seklawi was the main heckler, but News Corp Australia identifies Mukhlis Mr, 33, as the man thrown out by police. The Guardian states the man was released without charge, while News Corp Australia reports he was thrown down the stairs and given a move-on direction, no charge implied but more force used. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, and Sydney Morning Herald. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis.